She accompanied an elderly woman on a walk, not knowing she was the millionaire's former teacher. The headline flashed across Laura Beaumont's phone screen as she scrolled through her daily news feed. She chuckled at the absurd clickbait. Title: completely unaware that in just 3 days, those exact words would describe her own life. If someone had told her that morning, as she hurried through Chicago's bustling streets in her tailored suit, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, that she was about to stumble into a story more fantastic than any algorithm-generated headline, she would have dismissed it with her trademark practical laugh. But fate, as Laura would soon discover, had a wicked sense of humor and impeccable timing. The autumn air nipped at Laura's cheeks as she navigated through Grant Park, taking her usual shortcut to the gleaming downtown skyscraper where she served as Executive Director of Corporate Partnerships at Meridian Enterprises. At 32, Laura had established herself as a formidable presence in Chicago's business scene, respected for both her sharp mind and her genuine approach to relationship building. What most of her colleagues didn't know was that beyond the boardroom, battles and strategic negotiations, Laura spent nearly every free moment immersed in community service. Laura Beaumont, a wavering voice called out, interrupting her mental review of the day's meetings. Laura turned to see an elderly woman struggling to maintain her balance on the park's uneven pathway. Without hesitation, she tucked her phone away and rushed over. "Are you all right, ma'am? Can I help you?" Laura asked, gently taking the woman's arm. "Oh, thank you, dear. These paths are not what they used to be, or perhaps it's my legs." The woman's eyes crinkled with self-deprecating humor. "I was hoping to make it across the park to watch the children feed the ducks. It's my little weekly happiness." Something about the woman's dignified manner and the soft wisdom in her blue eyes struck Laura. "I am heading that way myself. Would you like some company?" "That would be lovely. I am Margaret Patterson, by the way. Most people call me Mrs. P. Laura Beaumont. Pleasure to meet you." As they walked slowly toward the pond, Laura found herself enchanted by Mrs. Patterson's observations about the changing park, the city's evolution, and the timeless nature of human connection. There was something familiar about her. Perhaps it was the way she articulated her thoughts with such precision and warmth. "You remind me of one of my favorite students," Mrs. Patterson remarked. "He had that same attentive look when listening. Always made an old teacher feel valued. You were a teacher, but for over 40 years at St. Ignatius, taught everything from literature to ethics, retired almost a decade ago now." Laura smiled. "That explains why you're so easy to talk to. Teachers have that gift." "Some more than others," Mrs. Patterson laughed. "Tell me, what keeps you busy these days, besides rescuing wobbly old women in parks?" Laura told her about her work at Meridian and her community service projects. As the words tumbled out, she realized how rarely she spoke about both aspects of her life together. At work, she was the focused executive. In her volunteer work, she was simply Laura, the reliable helper. Mrs. Patterson listened intently, occasionally, asking questions that somehow cut straight to the heart of Laura's motivations. "You know, dear, it is quite rare to find someone who can navigate both worlds so fluidly," Mrs. Patterson observed. "Most people either chase wealth or meaning, rarely understanding they can pursue both." "I'm not sure I am succeeding." "Either sometimes," Laura admitted with surprising candor. "My parents built Beaumont Foods from nothing into a regional powerhouse. Being their daughter in a partner company comes with expectations." She hadn't planned to share so much, but something about Mrs. Patterson invited confidence. "Ah, the Beaumonts. I didn't make the connection. Your parents' yogurt saved many of my faculty meetings from complete tedium." Mrs. Patterson's eyes twinkled. "And what about your heart, Laura? Is there room in your busy life for love?" Laura laughed, deflecting. Between quarterly reports and Saturday soup kitchens? Barely enough room for my cat Fitzgerald. Named after F. Scott, I hope. Of course, he is equally dramatic and demanding of attention. They reached the pond, watching as children tossed bread to eager ducks. "Would you like to join me on the bench?" Mrs. Patterson asked. Laura checked her watch. "I'd love to, but I'm already running late for a meeting. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize for having purpose, dear, but perhaps we could do this again. I am here every Wednesday morning." Jeffrey Winslow had spent his entire life fighting against the gravitational pull of his family name. At 34, he still felt the weight of the Winslow food empire pressing down on his shoulders, despite the fact that he'd chosen a path as far removed from corporate boardrooms as possible. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Benedict S. Seminary, casting colorful patterns across his sparse room as he prepared for the day ahead. "Winslow! Phone call!" Father Michael S. voice echoed down the hallway. Jeffrey sighed, already knowing who it would be. His father, Charles Winslow, maintained a predictable schedule of attempts to lure his only son back to the family business. Their conversations followed a well-worn path. His father, as thinly veiled disappointment, his mother, as gentle mediation, and Jeffrey, as increasingly fragile resolve. "Hello, Father," Jeffrey answered, intentionally using the double-meaning greeting. Jeffrey, his father's voice carried the weight of a billion-dollar enterprise and unmet expectations. "Your mother and I were hoping you might reconsider joining us for the Foundation Gala next month. As a family. I've already committed to the community outreach program that weekend," Jeffrey replied, running his hand through his dark hair. "And I am not sure what value I'd add to a room full of potential investors." "Value? You're my son. The heir to everything I've built. That has inherent value, regardless of your current situation." The familiar tension settled between them. Jeffrey gazed out the window at the seminary gardens, where he spent most of his free time, finding peace among the wildflowers and vegetable patches he tended. "I'll think about it," he conceded, knowing it was easier than arguing. "Good. And Jeffrey, it wouldn't hurt to remember that even St. Francis came from wealth before he found his calling. Using privilege for good isn't a sin." After ending the call, Jeffrey headed to the seminary garden, seeking the solace he always found among growing things. The earthy scent of fresh soil scented him as he knelt to weed around the tomato plants. Here, among the quiet industry of nature, the whispers of doubt quieted. Was he truly called to priesthood, or was he simply running from the Winslow legacy? "Escaping again, Winslow?" Father Thomas' amused voice broke through his reverie. Jeffrey looked up at his mentor with a rueful smile. "Just communing with God's creation." Father Thomas settled beside him on the garden bench, "and avoiding your theology paper, no doubt." "That, too." The older priest studied him with knowing eyes. "Your restlessness has grown lately. Care to share what's troubling you?" Jeffrey Josh's hands stilled. "Do you ever wonder if you recalled to serve in ways different than you imagined?" "Every day for 40 years, Father Thomas replied with a laugh. "Is this about your family again?" "Partly. They respect my choices, or at least they say they do, but I know they were waiting for me to come to my senses and take over the company." Jeffrey plucked a ripe cherry tomato and rolled it between his fingers. "But it is more than that. I feel drawn to service, to meaningful connection with people, but I am not certain the priesthood is my path." Father Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "The collar isn't tea for everyone who feels called to serve. Have you considered other forms of ministry?" "Like what?" "Start small. The seminary is supporting that community picnic in Grant Park this weekend. Why not represent us there? Connect with people. Listen to their stories. Sometimes God speaks most clearly through the voices of others." Jeffrey considered this. I could do that. Excellent. Be at the park entrance at 10 a.m. Saturday, and Jeffrey, leave your family name at the door. Go as yourself, not as a Winslow or a seminary student. Just be Jeffrey. On Saturday morning, Jeffrey arrived at Grant Park early, helping to set up tables and arrange food donations. The simplicity of the work, carrying chairs, spreading tablecloths, brought him unexpected joy. No one here knew him as the reluctant heir to the Winslow fortune. He was just another volunteer in jeans and a faded Chicago Cubs t-shirt. As people began arriving, Jeffrey found himself assigned to welcome duty alongside a woman he hadn't met before. She was efficiently organizing name tags while simultaneously directing volunteers, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her movements quick and purposeful. "Oh, you must be the seminary representative," she said without looking up. "I am Laura, event coordinator. There is coffee in the blue cooler if you need it." "Jeffrey," he replied, extending his hand, "and coffee sounds perfect." When she finally glanced up, their eyes met and something electric passed between them. Recognition, though they had never met before. Her brown eyes widened slightly, and Jeffrey felt an uncomfortable awareness that she might have made the connection to his last name. "Winslow," she said slowly. "As in, just Jeffrey, please," he interrupted with a practiced smile. To his surprise, her expression shifted from surprise to what appeared to be relief. "Just Laura, then," she replied with a genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "Care to help me set up the name tag station?" As they worked side by side, Jeffrey found himself stealing glances at Laura. There was something compelling about her focused energy, the way she knew everyone's names, the gentle authority she commanded without being overbearing. When an elderly woman approached their table with a walking cane, Laura's face lit up with genuine affection. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm so glad you could make it." "I wouldn't miss it, dear. And who is this young man?" "This is Jeffrey, our seminary volunteer." "Jeffrey, this is Mrs. Patterson, retired teacher and my new Wednesday walking companion." Mrs. Patterson's eyes sparkled with interest as she studied Jeffrey. "Seminary, Interesting choice." Something in her tone made Jeffrey feel transparent, as though she could see right through his carefully constructed identity. "Still discerning," he admitted. "The best journeys often have unclear destinations," Mrs. Patterson replied cryptically. "Laura, dear, would you mind if Jeffrey escorted me to a table? These old legs aren't what they used to be." As Jeffrey offered his arm to Mrs. Patterson, she leaned in and whispered, "You have your mother's eyes, you know. Elizabeth was always my brightest student at St. Ignatius." Jeffrey froze. "You knew my mother?" "Taught her for 4 years, ethics and literature. She had a beautiful mind and a rebellious streak a mile wide beneath all that proper behavior." Mrs. Patterson patted his arm. "Some things, it seems, are hereditary." Before Jeffrey could process this revelation, Laura called everyone to find seats for lunch. Somehow, he found himself seated beside her with Mrs. Patterson on his other side, her presence like a bridge between his past and an unexpected future that suddenly seemed to be taking shape before him. As the conversation flowed around the community table, Jeffrey realized he felt more himself than he had in years, not as a Winslow, not as a seminary student, but simply as Jeffrey, a man discovering that his carefully planned escape route might have led him exactly where he needed to be. Laura couldn't concentrate on the community picnic speeches. Her mind kept drifting to the man sitting beside her, Jeffrey Winslow. The Winslow name was inescapable in Chicago's business circles, particularly for someone working in food. Industry partnerships. Winslow Dairy Products was the biggest competitor to her parents, Beaumont Foods, though they operated in slightly different segments of the market. If her colleagues at Meridian knew she was sharing cucumber sandwiches With the heir to the Winslow Empire, they'd either think she was conducting industrial espionage or setting up the merger of the century. But the man beside her seemed anything but the corporate raider type. His hands were calloused, his demeanor quiet, his attention completely focused on whoever was speaking. Unlike the polished executives Laura encountered daily, Jeffrey seemed almost uncomfortable in his own skin, as though he was trying to take up less space in the world, rather than more. "Not what you expected from a Winslow, am I?" he murmured, catching her studying him. Laura felt herself blush. "I'm sorry, that was rude." "It says fine. I am used to it." His smile held no bitterness, just a gentle self-awareness. "Though I admit, I am also trying to place you. Beaumont, any relation to Beaumont Foods?" It was Laura S. turn to look uncomfortable. Daughter of the founders. Jeffrey Ann's eyes widened. Then he burst into unexpected laughter. "Well, this is certainly one for the Chicago Business Journal. A Winslow and a Beaumont breaking bread together without lawyers present." Laura couldn't help laughing too. At a community picnic, no less. "Scandalous. I won to tell if you won tea," he replied conspiratorially. "Deal." Laura found herself relaxing. "Though I should confess, I'm actually employed by Meridian Enterprises, not directly by my parents' company. And I am at St. Benedict S. Seminary, not Winslow headquarters," Jeffrey countered. "Looks like we both family disappointments." His words carried no real sting, but Laura glimpsed something vulnerable beneath his casual tone. "Is that how you see yourself? A disappointment?" Jeffrey seemed surprised by the direct question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "My parents have been supportive in their way, but there's always the unspoken expectation that I'll grow out of my spiritual phase and take my place at Winslow. And will you? Grow out of it, I mean." He looked past her toward the park, tree line, his expression thoughtful. "I came to the seminary seeking purpose. Some days I think I've found it. Other days, you wonder if you hiding." Laura finished for him. Their eyes met, and Laura felt an unexpected connection. The recognition of someone who understood the particular burden of carrying a legacy you hadn't asked for. "What about you?" Jeffrey asked. "Working for a partner company instead. Of Beaumont Foods directly. Strategic career move or escape plan?" "Both," Laura admitted. "I wanted to prove I could succeed on my own merits, not just as the boss's daughter. But I am still orbiting the family business, aren't I? Never quite breaking free." "And your community work? Where does that fit in?" Laura glanced around at the diverse group gathered for the picnic, families from all walks of life, sharing food and conversation. "This is where I feel most myself. No expectations, no family name hanging over me, just doing something that matters." "I understand completely," Jeffrey said softly. "That's how I feel in the seminary garden." Mrs. Patterson, who had been suspiciously quiet beside them, suddenly chimed in. "You two should visit the butterfly pavilion they've set up near the pond. I hear it's quite spectacular." Laura recognized the transparent matchmaking attempt, but found herself nodding. "Anyway, I'd love to see it. Would you like to join us, Mrs. Patterson?" "Oh no, dear, these old bones need some rest. You young people go ahead." As they walked toward the butterfly pavilion, Laura was acutely aware of Jeffrey beside her. His height, the thoughtful way he moved, the respectful distance he maintained. He wasn't at all what she'd expected from the Winslow heir, who featured regularly in Chicago's business pages as the reclusive seminary student who turned his back on billions. "So," Laura began, seeking neutral ground, "how did you get involved with today's event?" "Father Thomas, my advisor at the seminary, suggested it. He thinks I need more exposure to community ministry." Jeffrey glanced at her. "Though I suspect he also thinks I need to spend less time talking to tomato plants and more time talking to people. And which do you prefer? Tomatoes are less complicated, he replied with a wry smile, but less interesting. I can to believe Mrs. Patterson taught your mother, Laura said as they entered the butterfly pavilion, a magical space filled with delicate winged creatures and flowering plants. It seems like such a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences anymore, Geoffrey said, standing still as a monarch butterfly landed on his outstretched hand. And too many have happened in my life. Like what? Like deciding to attend this picnic and finding myself seated next to the daughter of Beaumont Foods. His eyes met hers over the butterfly perched on his palm. What are the odds? The butterfly took flight, disappearing into a cluster of flowers. Around them, other visitors moved through the pavilion, but Laura felt suddenly as though they were alone, suspended in a moment of possibility. And to Mrs. Patterson would say, "'Tis providence, not coincidence," Laura said, her voice slightly unsteady. And what would Laura Beaumont say? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed insistently. With an apologetic smile, she checked the screen and her face fell. "I'm so sorry, at network, I need to take this." Stepping outside the pavilion, Laura answered the call from her CEO. A major potential client was having second thoughts about a partnership, and they needed her to come in immediately to salvage the deal. As she hung up, she felt the familiar resignation, her personal life once again taking a back seat to professional demands. Geoffrey had followed her outside, maintaining a respectful distance during her call. His understanding expression only made her feel worse. "Emergency at work?" she explained. "I have to go." "Of course." He nodded without a trace of judgment. "It was nice meeting you, Laura." Something about his easy acceptance of her departure made Laura bold. "I walk with Mrs. Patterson on Wednesday mornings in the park by the duck pond, around 8 a.m. Geoffrey Assa's slow smile transformed his serious face. "I happen to enjoy watching ducks on Wednesday mornings." "What a coincidence," Laura replied, returning his smile. As she hurried toward the park exit, Laura felt light-hearted despite the work crisis awaiting her. For the first time in years, she was looking forward to something that had nothing to do with career advancement or family expectations. She was simply Laura, a woman who might, coincidentally, run into an interesting man by the duck pond on Wednesday morning. Behind her, Mrs. Patterson watched with satisfaction as Laura left and Geoffrey returned to the picnic tables, both wearing expressions that suggested their worlds had shifted slightly on their axes. The elderly teacher smiled to herself, mentally, adjusting her Wednesday morning schedule. Sometimes even the best students needed a little extra guidance outside the classroom. The Wednesday morning sun painted Grant Park in soft, golden hues as Geoffrey approached the duck pond, his heart beating an embarrassingly eager rhythm. He'd spent more time than he cared to admit choosing between his two decent non-seminary shirts and had ultimately settled on a blue button-down that Father Thomas once mentioned brought out his eyes. "But you did being ridiculous," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. "It is just a walk with two women, one of whom is old enough to be your grandmother." But as he neared the pond, he saw only Mrs. Patterson seated on her usual bench. No sign of Laura. The unreasonable disappointment he felt confirmed what he'd been denying to himself since the picnic. He was attracted to Laura Beaumont in a way that complicated his already complicated life. "Good morning, Geoffrey," Mrs. Patterson called, her knowing smile suggesting she saw right through him. "Beautiful day for duck watching, isn't it?" "It is," he agreed, sitting beside her. "Is Laura not joining us today?" "Ah, straight and to the point. I appreciate that in a young man." Mrs. Patterson's eyes twinkled. "She texted me earlier. Some crisis at work. She sends her regrets." "Oh." Geoffrey tried to mask his disappointment. "Well, I'm happy to keep you company." If you'd like, and I would like that very much. Mrs. Patterson patted the bench beside her, though I suspect company was near what you were hoping for this morning. Geoffrey felt himself flush. Mrs. Patterson, Margaret, please, and don't not to worry, I won, to tease you too much. But I've been around long enough to recognize that particular look in a young man, eyes, rather than deny it. Geoffrey sighed. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who has spent decades observing human nature. She studied him thoughtfully. And your mother had that same transparent quality. Elizabeth could never hide what she was feeling, no matter how hard she tried. You really did know her well. I did. And I knew your father too, though he was never my student. Charles was already making a name for himself in business when he started courting Elizabeth. Margaret's eyes grew distant with memory. They were quite the talk of St. Ignatius, the brilliant, passionate young woman and the ambitious entrepreneur. Geoffrey leaned forward, hungry for this unexpected glimpse into his parents' early relationship. My mother never speaks much about those days. No, she wouldn't. Elizabeth was deeply torn between her own academic ambitions and her feelings for your father. Sound familiar? The gentle accusation hung in the air between them. Before Geoffrey could respond, his phone chimed, a text from Laura. So sorry to miss our walk. Rain check for Friday, same time, same place. Geoffrey couldn't help the smile that spread across his face as he replied, I'll be there. The ducks will be disappointed today. Her response came, almost immediately. Tell them it is quarterly review season. Even ducks understand corporate deadlines. Margaret watched this exchange with barely concealed satisfaction. The good news, I take it. Laura suggested rescheduling for Friday. And will you be there? Yes, even though you see rediscerning a vocation that traditionally involves celibacy. Geoffrey winced at her directness. I am still in the discernment phase. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. And what does Father Thomas say about your discernment? He encouraged me to explore all aspects of my calling before making final decisions, Geoffrey admitted. Wise man. Margaret stood, gesturing for Geoffrey to walk with her along the pond's edge. Did you know I almost became a nun? Geoffrey looked at her in surprise. Really? Oh yes, right after college. I was absolutely certain it was, my path. Spent 8 months as a postulant with the Sisters of Mercy. She smiled at the memory. Then I met Arthur Patterson at a church fundraiser. 6 months later, we were married. What changed your mind? I realized I was running toward the convent, not being called to it. Margaret stopped to toss some breadcrumbs to the waiting ducks. I was using it as an escape from expectations, from having to figure out what I really wanted from life. The parallel to his own situation wasn't lost on Geoffrey. And you don't regret your decision? Not for a moment. I found my true vocation in teaching, in marriage, in raising our children. She turned to face him directly. But Geoffrey, that was my journey. Yours may be entirely different. The question isn't whether priesthood is a worthy calling. It absolutely is. But whether it's your calling. They continued walking in companionable silence, Geoffrey's mind churning with Margaret's words. After completing their circuit of the pond, he helped her back to her bench. I should get going, he said reluctantly. And morning prayers at the seminary. Of course. Margaret squeezed his hand. But before you go, I have a small homework assignment for you. Geoffrey raised an eyebrow. Homework? Old teachers never quite retire. She smiled. I want you to make a list of what you're walking toward in life and what you are walking away from. Be brutally honest with yourself. Sometimes, Geoffrey, Goddess call isn't a lightning bolt, but a gentle nudge toward authenticity. As Jeffrey headed back to the seminary, Margaret S. assignment weighed on his mind. What was he walking toward? What was he walking away from? The answers weren't as clear as they had once seemed. Back in his sparse room, Jeffrey opened his journal and wrote the two headings. Under walking away from, he listed family expectations, wealth, business world, materialism, the Winslow. Name. Under walking toward, he began with service, spiritual growth, simplicity. He stared at the second list, aware of its inadequacy. Was that truly all he was walking toward? A life defined primarily by what it was rather than what it was? With sudden clarity, Jeffrey added another item to the second list. Laura. The word sat there, challenging him, forcing him to confront the feelings that had been growing since the picnic. He was attracted to her, yes, but it was more than that. In their brief interactions, he'd glimpsed someone who understood his struggles because she shared similar ones. Someone who, like him, was trying to chart her own course while honoring her family's legacy. Jeffrey's phone buzzed with a text from Father Thomas, reminding him about evening vespers. As he prepared to leave, his gaze fell on a small plant, growing in a clay pot by his window, a cutting from the seminary garden that had taken root against the odds. Perhaps that was the perfect metaphor for his current state. Transplanted, still fragile, but finding unexpected ways to grow in new soil. Friday couldn't have come soon enough. The Meridian Enterprises boardroom fell silent as Laura concluded her presentation. After 3 days of emergency meetings, late nights, and enough coffee to float a small yacht, she'd managed to salvage the wavering client partnership. Now, facing the executive team, she awaited their verdict. "Excellent work, Laura," Harold Matthews, the CEO, finally said. "You'd have not only retained HealthBite as a client, but expanded our involvement in their new product line. The board will be pleased." "Thank you, sir," Laura replied, maintaining her professional composure despite her exhaustion. The team really pulled together on this one. As the meeting adjourned, Harold held her back. "A word, Laura?" She nodded, bracing herself. Despite the successful outcome, she had to make some quick decisions without full approval, and she suspected a gentle reprimand was coming. Instead, Harold smiled. "Your parents must be proud. This kind of crisis management is exactly what Beaumont Foods will need when you eventually take the helm." Laura froze. "I am sorry." "Oh, come now." Harold waved dismissively. "We all know that is the end game here. You're getting excellent experience with us, but Charles Beaumont isn't getting any younger. The succession plan is obvious." "I wasn't aware my career path was so predetermined," Laura said carefully, her mind racing. Harold laughed. "Laura, you're Beaumont. Of course it is. And frankly, your work here has proven you ready whenever the time comes." As she left the building, Laura's thoughts swirled chaotically. Was her entire career at Meridian simply viewed as training wheels for eventually taking over Beaumont Foods? Had everyone known this except her, or worse, had she known it subconsciously all along and simply been pretending otherwise? Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Heard about the HealthBite save. Dinner Sunday to celebrate? Dad wants to discuss something exciting." Laura could guess what that something exciting might be. The familiar weight of expectations settled on her shoulders as she typed a non-committal response. Then she saw the time. 7:45 a.m. She was supposed to meet Jeffrey and Mrs. Patterson at the park in 15 minutes. After cancelling on Wednesday, she couldn't bear to disappoint them again, especially since she'd been thinking about Jeffrey. Far more than was reasonable, given their brief acquaintance. Laura flagged down a taxi, giving the driver directions to Grant Park. As they navigated morning traffic, she tried to push aside thoughts of Harold's comments and her parents' expectations. For just 1 hour, She wanted to be simply Laura, not a Beaumont, not an executive, just a woman meeting friends by a duck pond on a beautiful autumn morning. When she arrived, slightly breathless, she spotted Geoffrey and Mrs. Patterson already seated on their usual bench. The sight of Geoffrey, tall and thoughtful, leaning toward Mrs. Patterson with genuine interest, caused an unexpected flutter in her chest. "I was beginning to think corporate America had claimed another victim," Mrs. Patterson called out as Laura approached. "Almost, but I made a daring escape," Laura replied, smiling. "Good morning, Geoffrey." "Good morning." His smile reached, his eyes crinkling them at the corners in a way that made him look younger, less burdened. "Oh, the ducks have been asking about you? All good things, I hope?" "Mostly complaints about the quality of breadcrumbs lately. They were very particular." Mrs. Patterson watched their exchange with undisguised delight. "Well, since you are both here, I have a confession to make. My arthritis is acting up a bit today, so I think I'll cut our walk short and just enjoy the sunshine on this bench. But you two should go ahead. Youth shouldn't be wasted sitting still. The transparent matchmaking attempt would have been embarrassing if it weren't so endearing." Laura and Geoffrey exchanged amused glances. "Are you sure, Mrs. Patterson?" Laura asked. "I'm very happy to keep you company." "Quite sure, dear. Off you go. Perhaps circle the rose garden. It is lovely this time of year." As they walked away, Geoffrey leaned closer to Laura. "Do you get the feeling we're being manipulated by a master?" "Absolutely," Laura laughed. "Though I can't say I mind." They fell into an easy rhythm, walking side by side along the park as winding paths. Geoffrey asked about her work emergency, and Laura found herself sharing not just the crisis details, but her conflicted feelings about Harold's comments. "So, everyone just assumes you all take over Beaumont Foods eventually?" Geoffrey asked. "Apparently, which is ironic since I've spent my entire career trying to establish my own identity apart from the family business." "While still orbiting it," Geoffrey observed gently. "Exactly." Laura sighed. "And I'm starting to wonder if I've been lying to myself all these years. Maybe I've never really wanted to break free, just to prove I am worthy of the inheritance before claiming it." They reached the rose garden where late-blooming flowers provided splashes of color against the autumn landscape. Geoffrey was quiet for a moment, seemingly gathering his thoughts. "Can I tell you something I've never admitted to anyone?" he finally asked. Laura nodded, sensing the importance of what was coming. "Sometimes I think my religious vocation is just another form of rebellion against my family," Geoffrey said quietly. "A way of saying, I reject your values, while claiming moral high ground, and other times I think it's genuine that I've truly been called to serve." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "How do you separate authentic calling from reaction against expectations?" The vulnerability in his admission touched Laura deeply. "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but I understand the question perfectly." Geoffrey stopped walking, turning to face her. "That is just it, isn't it? You do understand, maybe better than anyone I've ever met." And something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition of kindred spirits, of shared struggles beneath their very different exterior lives. Laura was suddenly acutely aware of their physical proximity, of Geoffrey's intense gaze, of her own quickened heartbeat. "Laura, Geoffrey, there is something—" They both spoke simultaneously, then laughed nervously. "You first," Laura said. Geoffrey took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about you, more than I probably should, given my current vocational discernment." "I've been thinking about you too," Laura admitted, surprised by her own candor. "This is complicated," Geoffrey said, gesturing vaguely between them. "I am still at the seminary. You've been navigating your own career crossroads, and our families. would have collective heart attacks if they knew we were even talking, Laura finished, smiling wryly. Exactly. They resumed walking, a new awareness humming between them. As they circled back toward Mrs. Patterson. "Yes, bench," Geoffrey spoke again. "Mrs. Patterson gave me homework after our last walk. She asked me to write down what I am walking toward in life and what I am walking away from. And what did you discover? That I've been clearer about what I am rejecting than what I am embracing." Geoffrey looked at her sideways. "When that I added your name to the walking toward column." Laura S. breath caught. That S, quite an admission for a seminary student. "I know, that S, why I needed to tell you." His expression was earnest, open. "I don't know what this is between us, Laura. I don't know where it might lead, if anywhere, but it feels important, too important to ignore because of complicated circumstances." Before Laura could respond, her phone rang, her father. Udris ringtone. With an apologetic glance at Geoffrey, she answered, "Dad, hi, can I call you back in a few minutes?" She listened, her expression shifting from mild annoyance to concern. "Wait, what? When did this happen?" Another pause. "Yes, of course, I'll be right there." She hung up, turning to Geoffrey with regret etched across her face. "I have to go. There's a situation at my parents' S company. Some issue with a production line that could affect multiple partnerships, including Meridian AS." "Of course." Geoffrey nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Family comes first." "That S just it," Laura said, surprising herself with her honesty. "I am not sure if I am rushing there as a dutiful daughter or an ambitious executive, and I am not sure which is worse." Geoffrey gently touched her arm. "Either way, you'd be responding to something that matters to you. That is not wrong, Laura." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the park, the crisis, even Mrs. Patterson waiting on her bench, all seemed to fade away. Then Laura S. phone buzzed again, breaking the spell. "I have to go," Geoffrey finished for her. "But Laura, let S not leave this conversation unfinished." She nodded, already backing away. "Sunday, 4 p.m., lakefront by Buckingham. Fountain?" "I'll be there," he promised. As Laura hurried toward the park exit, she felt both lighter and heavier, lighter for having admitted her feelings, heavier with the knowledge that acknowledging them would only complicate her already complex life. But for the first time in years, the complications didn't feel like burdens. They felt like possibilities. What neither Laura nor Geoffrey noticed was Mrs. Patterson making a phone call of her own as they parted ways, her expression both satisfied and concerned as she watched the scene unfold exactly as she had anticipated and perhaps orchestrated. Epilogue. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Buckingham Fountain as Geoffrey paced anxiously, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Laura was late, which wasn't surprising given the production crisis, but each passing minute amplified his doubts. After their last conversation in the park, he'd spent hours in prayer and reflection, trying to reconcile his growing feelings for her with his religious vocation. He had even sought Father Thomas S. counsel, confessing his confusion about his path. The older priest had listened without judgment, then asked a single penetrating question. "Are you running from something or toward something, Geoffrey?" Well, that question had haunted him for 2 days, until he finally reached a conclusion that brought both terror and exhilaration. Now, waiting for Laura, he wondered if he'd have the courage to share it with her. "Geoffrey." He turned to find not Laura but Mrs. Patterson approaching, leaning heavily on her cane. "Mrs. Patterson, what are you doing here?" "I'm afraid I've meddled terribly in your lives," she said without preamble. "And now I need to make things right." Geoffrey, his stomach dropped. "What do you mean? Is Laura okay?" "She is fine, but she won't be coming today." Mrs. Patterson gestured to a nearby bench. "Sit with me, Geoffrey. There is something you need to know." As they sat, Mrs. Patterson explained how she had known both the Beaumont and Winslow families for decades, watching from the sidelines as their business rivalry intensified. And when I recognized Laura in the park that first day, I saw an opportunity to perhaps heal old wounds. And when you appeared at the picnic, well, it seemed like providence. "You've been matchmaking," Jeffrey said, not sure whether to be amused or annoyed. "I prefer facilitating divine intervention," Mrs. Patterson replied with a small smile. "But I underestimated the complications. Laura's parents have asked her to officially join Beaumont Foods as heir apparent, and your father has been pushing me to leave the seminary and take my place at Winslow," Jeffrey finished. "I know, but what does that have to do with Laura not meeting me today?" Mrs. Patterson sighed. "The production issue was at a facility that makes packaging for both companies. Laura discovered that someone at Winslow had outbid Beaumont for exclusive rights to the facility's output, potentially crippling Beaumont's new product launch." Jeffrey felt sick. "And she thinks I knew about this?" "No, but she's been reminded in the starkest terms of the complexity of any connection between you. Her father has specifically mentioned his distrust of the Winslows, you in particular, me, but I have nothing to do with the company. You are still a Winslow," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "And in Chicago's food industry, that name carries certain assumptions." Jeffrey stood abruptly, pacing again. "This is absurd. I need to talk to her. Explain that I had no idea." "She knows that, Jeffrey. She's not angry with you. She is trying to protect you both from an impossible situation. By not showing up, by making decisions for both of us, by giving you both space to think clearly." Mrs. Patterson's voice took on the firm tone of a teacher correcting a stubborn student. "Laura asked me to give you a message. She said, tell him I understand now what he has been walking away from, and I respect him too much to ask him to walk back into it for me." The words hit Jeffrey like a physical blow. Laura thought she was setting him free, protecting him from having to choose between his vocation and his family name. She didn't understand that he'd already made his choice. "Where is she now?" he asked. "At the Beaumont Foods headquarters, downtown, meeting with her parents about taking over as CEO within the year." Mrs. Patterson watched him carefully. "What are you thinking, Jeffrey?" Instead of answering, he asked, "Did you know my mother's favorite Shakespeare play is Romeo and Juliet?" Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "I did. I directed her in the school production her senior year. She used to tell me it wasn't a story about forbidden love, but about the tragic cost of family stubbornness." Jeffrey squared his shoulders. "I am not letting stubborn family rivalries dictate my life, or Laura's if she'll have me. And the seminary, your vocation? My vocation is to serve, to live authentically, to follow the path I am called to, not the one I am running from." Jeffrey bent to kiss Mrs. Patterson's cheek. "Thank you for your meddling, and for helping me see what I've been walking toward all along." As Jeffrey strode purposefully toward the street to hail a taxi, Mrs. Patterson watched him go, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. "Well played, Margaret," she murmured to herself. "Well played indeed." The reception area of Beaumont Foods fell silent as Jeffrey Winslow walked through the doors. He knew the tableau he presented, the heir to Winslow Dairy Products, their chief competitor, standing in the heart of Beaumont territory without appointment or invitation. "I need to see Laura Beaumont," he announced to the startled receptionist. "It is urgent." Before she could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Laura herself emerged, deep in conversation with an older couple Jeffrey recognized from business publications as Charles and Eleanor Beaumont. All three froze at the sight of him. "Jeffrey." Laura's voice was a mixture of shock and something softer, more vulnerable. "What are you doing here?" Apparently causing a scene, he replied with a small smile. But it seemed more effective than texting. Charles Beaumont stepped protectively in front of his daughter. "Young man, I don't know what game you'd be playing." "No games, Mr. Beaumont," Geoffrey interrupted respectfully. "Just truth. May I speak with Laura privately, please?" Laura moved around her father. "It is okay, Dad. We can use the small conference room." Once alone, they stood awkwardly, the weight of family names and business rivalries hanging between them. "Mrs. Patterson found me at the fountain," Geoffrey finally said. "Now she told me about the packaging facility, about your parents' offer. Geoffrey, I'm sorry I didn't come, but after everything that happened, you thought you were protecting me." He stepped closer. "But Laura, I don't need protection. I need honesty. I need to know if what between us is worth fighting for, even if it means confronting both our families and my own confusion about my path." Laura's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I've spent my life running away from my name, from expectations, from the person I was afraid of becoming. The seminary was part of that escape." He took her hands in his. "But meeting you, talking with you, it has made me realize I want to walk towards something, not just away from everything else." "And what are you walking toward?" Laura asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A life of authenticity, of purpose, and if you be willing, a chance to see where this connection between us might lead." Geoffrey smiled, squeezing her hands. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and your family business. I'm asking if we can find a way forward together on our own terms." Laura studied him, her practical nature wrestling with the unexpected. Hope his words kindled. "My parents just offered me the CEO position," she said. "After years of working to prove myself, they finally see me as capable, not just as their daughter." "That is wonderful," Geoffrey said sincerely. "You deserve that recognition." "And what about you? The seminary?" Ivy realized. "My calling isn't to the priesthood. It is to service, yes, but through a different path." Geoffrey took a deep breath. "None, I am going to talk to my parents about creating a Winslow Foundation, separate from the company, but funded by it. Focused on food security, community gardens, nutrition education." Laura's face lit up with understanding. "Combining your love of growing things with meaningful service." "Exactly. And maybe finding ways for Beaumont and Winslow to collaborate rather than compete. Starting small, through foundation work perhaps." The audacity of the suggestion hung between them. Then Laura laughed, a bright, genuine sound that seemed to cut through the tension of the moment. "Mrs. Patterson would be insufferably pleased with herself," she said. "She already is," Geoffrey replied with a grin. Laura's expression softened. "This one to be easy, you know. Our families, the businesses, nothing worthwhile ever is." And Geoffrey released her hands to gently touch her cheek. "But I think we were both used to challenging expectations by now." The conference room door opened abruptly, revealing Charles and Eleanor Beaumont, and, to everyone's surprise, Elizabeth and Charles Winslow Sr. "What is going on here?" the elder Winslow demanded, his gaze fixed on his son. Mrs. Patterson appeared behind them, looking not at all apologetic. "I took the liberty of calling your parents, Geoffrey. I thought it was time for a long overdue reunion of old classmates." The stunned silence that followed was broken by Elizabeth Winslow's gasp of recognition. Margaret Patterson. "Hello, Elizabeth. It has been too long." The elder Mrs. Winslow turned to Eleanor Beaumont. "Ellie, you didn't—" "You tell me Margaret was still in Chicago." "I had no idea you knew each other," Eleanor replied, equally surprised. As the older generation tried to make sense of the connections, Laura and Geoffrey exchanged glances of bewildered amusement. Their carefully separated worlds were colliding in ways neither could have predicted. And perhaps, Geoffrey suggested quietly to Laura, we should all sit down together. It seems we have a lot to talk about. Laura nodded, slipping her hand into his. Yes, we do, starting with the future, not the past. Behind them, Mrs. Patterson smiled contentedly. Some lessons couldn't be taught in classrooms. They had to be lived, experienced, sometimes orchestrated by a persistent former teacher who understood that the most important education happened not through books, but through the heart-as-own curriculum. And as the unlikely group moved toward Beaumont Food's main conference room, two competing families, a retired teacher and two young people brave enough to chart a new course, the future began to take shape. Unexpected, challenging, but filled with the promise of connection that transcended old rivalries and embraced new possibilities. Sometimes, the most meaningful journeys weren't about walking away from something, but about walking toward someone and finding in that shared path a place that finally felt like home, the end